Political situation in Edo State, South Nigeria, has become very tense following developments there yesterday. The power tussle has seen a purported impeachment of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the State House of Assembly by 17 members, 12 of whom were never sworn in at the moment. The House of Assembly complex is under lockdown. From Benin, the state capital, Arise correspondent Egosa Igumbo reports.
In Benin, the Edo State capital. It started with a siege at the entrance of the assembly complex by heavily armed security presence. Speaker of the House, Franco Kiye, had raised an alarm of an alleged takeover of the assembly by 17 APC member group, a group made up of 14 whose seats had been declared vacant and 3 others. But government responded with the deployment of police to protect the complex that has been undergoing renovation. In his reaction to the alleged plots, Governor Gordon Obaseki said he will use every instrument of state to fight the forces working against democracy.
All their mechanisms will fail. We are ready for them. Let them come. We will teach them a new thing. We will teach them so many new things. They will learn new lessons. Abuja, Imo State, let them come.
You can see that the preparation to go on intensive work has been on by shading off the surrounding and so on. You can see materials for the work. They are here. And we're really embarrassed that people, at this level of our democratic growth, people could still think that we are back to the state of nature, where there is no order, there is no law. And I think that from what you have seen, the Edo people are willing to resist that.
But things took a different twist later in the day when the 17-member group convened in a private residence with all the elements of an assembly seating, including a maze and some persons acting as officers of the assembly. The group purportedly impeached the speaker and his deputy, Roland Asoro, who was only elected 24 hours earlier by a 7-member house. They claimed the impeachment was because of gross misconduct, violation of house rules, and high-handedness. A member of the group, Victor Doro, was elected as new speaker and Emmanuel Agbaje as the deputy speaker.
I will want to reiterate that this assembly is not in any way out for impeachment of any executive member of this government. Instead, we are out to bring a better legislation for the people of Edo State to complement the executive capabilities of the state. We are not here to impeach anybody as penned out in the public space. I want to encourage the people of Edo State for peaceful coexistence in these states. And with regard today, the Edo State House of Assembly complex was invaded by hoodlums. I am using this opportunity to call on the General Police, to call on the CP Edo State to, without fail, make the Edo State House of Assembly ready without hoodlums tomorrow morning.
The 17-member faction are insisting on resuming seating at the assembly complex on Friday. They want government to restore normalcy to the premise ahead of their resumption. Egosa Igumbo, Arise News.
Disappointing, I must say, as someone who comes from Edo State. And to also put it out there, this is not about the Edo people. It's just the selfish interest of a few men. And yes, Dr. Abati, I'll reduce this to gender this morning, who do not have regard for the basic tenets of democracy, who are desperate to grab power or hold on to it. Unfortunately, their actions do have consequences on the life of the Edo people. Dr. Abati.
Well, a few comments, and I'll try to be very quick with this. The first is that what happened in Edo State, in Benin City yesterday, at the Edo State House of Assembly, has very serious implications for either the integrity or the value of the forthcoming September 19 gubernatorial elections in that state. What we have seen is that, look, all the parties involved, they all have blames to share.
Yes.
No party is innocent. And that's directly to your point about nobody thinking about the interest or the concerns of the people of Edo State. And then beyond Edo State, it has implications for political stability in Nigeria. We should all be reminded of the fact that the crisis in the First Republic here in this same country started in the Western Region House of Assembly when gladiators, the NNDP and the Action Group decided to engage in political rascality on the floor of the Western Region House of Assembly. And that was what led in 1964, in 1962, May 29, 1962, to the declaration of a state of emergency in the Western region. And events, went spiral, and we've been told that that crisis in the Western region was one of the reasons for the January 1966 coup, as articulated by Kaduna and Zogo. So everyone has to be careful. It's not a matter for Edo State alone. It is for all Nigerians. And that's why I think that President Buhari should also personally take an interest in what is going on in that state. So that, Edo State, like the Western region in 1962, or Ondo State in 1980, as the case of Ondo State in 1983, does not become a catalyst for a nationwide crisis. Now, as to exactly what happened, very quickly. Now, I said everyone has a blame to share. First, lawmakers, 14 of them, whose seats had been declared vacant, suddenly showed up, and then they had a session at an undisclosed location to impeach the speaker. Now, the law is very clear. What they did is illegal. It's unconstitutional, because the Constitution is very clear that the proceedings of the State House of Assembly or of the legislature can only take place in a designated place. Now, that undisclosed location where they had their session is not the properly constitutionally designated place. Now, who swore in these 14 lawmakers whose seats have been declared vacant? We must also know that there is a case in court over that. So are they resorting to self-help or to rule of thumb? The position in Ojukwu versus Lagos State government is that you cannot resort to self-help or to the rule of thumb. So to that extent, what they have done is also, again, completely illegal. Now, they say they have had their proceeding. They can't have any proceeding in an undisclosed location.
With a fake mace.
Yes, and with a fake mace. Now, 3, the governor of Edo State himself, Godwin Obaseki, took the laws into his hands. He suddenly said he was renovating the House of Assembly. They put a gravel in front of the premises. They removed the symbolic mace on top of the building. Now, is that renovation that Obaseki is engaging in now, was it appropriated for? Did he notify the assembly? So you see that also on the part of the state governor, he too is also, taking the laws into his hands. But, there are other issues, but we don't have too much time. The thing to say is that, look, in all of this, the gladiators in Edo State should put the interest of the people first. They are not doing that. And ironically, yesterday, INEC held a meeting about the threat of violence in Edo State. Now, it's very clear now that that threat is real.
All right, that's all of the headline news that we took show right now. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News. Before we go over to Rotu's business update, I'll take this in place of Aaron this morning. We apologize for saying that he's not around today. The Coalition Against COVID-19 has commenced a multi-billion naira distribution of palliatives targeting 1.7 million households across the country. The administrator of CACOVID, Zuera Yusufu, who spoke to journalists in Lagos on Thursday, said the initiative, which covers all 774 local government council areas in the country, will reach out to not less than 10 million people. The Food Palliative Initiative, which has gulped about 23 billion naira, is another of the group's contribution to support the government of Nigeria in checking the spread of the virus, as well as mitigating its devastating effect on the populace. Arise News, Tokunbo Oyetunji has the details.
Since its birth shortly after the outbreak of the pandemic in Nigeria, the Coalition Against COVID-19, a group of private sector players, has made its impact felt in the battle against the disease that has claimed not less than 927 lives in the country and inflicted untold hardship on many households. One 60-bed capacity isolation center in Lagos, another 500-bed capacity being put up in Kano. building of over 30 more and upgrade of medical facilities in the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. CACOVID is living its dream of pooling private sector resources and deploying same to the benefit of Nigerians, especially the vulnerable across the country, with over 15 billion naira already dispensed in that regard.
Raised money, and we've used that money to do 3 very specific things. One was to increase access to testing in Nigeria. That means that we ordered over 2 billion naira worth of testing equipment and supplies that we've distributed to NCDC and to the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 Nigeria.
Members of the coalition believe that though COVID-19 may be the most powerful adversary to face Nigeria and the world in recent years, but with the unity of purpose and taking responsibility for each other, its effect and spread can be curtailed. This is why the Food Palliative Initiative has been elaborately planned to cover as many vulnerable Nigerians as possible.
I told you last time what we discussed was how we were going to spend over 20 billion naira in terms of palliatives for 10 million people in Nigeria, representing 1.67 million households across the country. And so what I want to talk about today is how are we doing this distribution? How far have we gone? And what is it that we're expecting the states to do after these food distributions have been flagged off? So the total that we've spent so far on non-food palliatives is 15,220,419,521. The total that we've spent for food, is 23,147,266,506 naira and 40 kobo.
We are not partisan. We don't care what party any state is from. We just want to make sure that every single thing you're seeing there is delivered to the people that really, really need them. And then if you remember, Zoe had mentioned that we have our team. Then we have a separate team as well, a monitoring and evaluation team.
With the announcement in Lagos, the coalition has divided the nation into 6 geopolitical zones, and the distribution is also being flagged off simultaneously in other states. Each benefiting household will receive a pack of food items such as these.
Now, each basket that the families will get include what you see in front of us here, which is a 10-kilo bag of rice, a 5-kilo bag of gari or maize flour or semolina, depending on where in the country the state is located.
We're giving palliatives. We're also making people aware that this pandemic is real. Because when you visit some of the market centers and other places, people don't even put on this mask.
We want your platforms, in addition to the money, obviously, to let people know this is real, it's not propaganda. This disease or this virus knows no age or status or color or body type. It's hitting everyone.
This is why it has also made advocacy another of its major focus, enlisting the help of CEOs, billionaires, and celebrities to speak to Nigerians in specially made media campaigns. The idea is for everybody to stay alive together. Tokumbo Oyetunji, Arise News, Lagos.
A very big thank you there to Tokumbo Oyetunji for that wonderful report. I mean, that's just to show what CACOVID has been doing. You could hear the figures, over 23 billion spent on food, distributing this palliative across border. And we saw pictures of that palliative, wheat, salt, and the like, just to be able to help an average Nigerian family in a time like this. I mean, what's your take on all of this great work? They've segmented Nigeria into 6 political zones, and they've been sharing this palliative for people out there. What's your take on this,
I dare say that that's the difference in the public sector and the private sector. You see how transparent it is to the kobo. They're telling you what they are spending and how they are spending it, which is fantastic. And we must commend them. You know that this is not the only thing they are doing as CACOVID. They've also donated isolation centers, and they're also committed to ramping up testing. So we commend them. It is what we need to see to do.
Yes, I think the effort of the private sector-led COVID coalition is commendable. And they've been very consistent This is not the first time that they will distribute food palliatives. You recall that at the peak of the lockdown, the private sector also distributed food in parts of Lagos and in other 6 geopolitical zones. What makes this special is that even with the easing of the lockdown, they still recognize the need to continue to provide support for the people. As for transparency, the group has said that they are going to put in place a special implementation and monitoring committee in place that will ensure that there is a proper delivery. And I think that that is very important because they're going to be working with state governments. Although they say that this is private sector-led, it is not about politics. They are non-partisan. Their interest is basically the people of Nigeria. And, you know, that decision to emphasize quality distribution and transparency is important because we saw the efforts made by some of the states in the distribution of food palliatives. And we saw how that ended up. The people complained that they didn't get the food. Even the federal government program for school children who were at home running into billions of naira. Nigerians are asking the question, where are the children that got the food? The private sector is, noted for, result-oriented operations. The third point, of course, to make is that while we praise the private sector, many Nigerians are also concerned about the strategy for business, this retrenchment of staff, this, disengagement of staff. Maybe also the private sector can form a coalition around all of that to see how, the interest of workers is protected. But now we take Rotus Odiri, who is here with Africa Business Update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adeso, and good morning, Rifai. We kick things off with a story in our sister publication this day on the Nigerian Airspace Management Authority with regards to the financial challenges that they've been facing. We have a quote from the managing director, Captain Fola Akinkotu. He was speaking with this day. He says NEMA is facing financial difficulties, so we need a bailout in order to survive. Last month, we took a loan to pay salaries, and this month, too, we will need another loan to add to what we have in order to be able to pay salaries. So we have another quote from him because he was talking extensively to this day. We have to break it down here. We earn revenue from the passenger service charge, which is collected by Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority and shared by the agencies. That's a key point to note here. We also earn revenue from en route, terminal, and navigation charges, but domestic airlines don't pay it. This is something international airlines pay. So we rely on international carriers, which pay us through IATA. And then final quote from him, got one more there. We long for international flights to resume. They have not resumed, but that is dependent on the Minister of Health because coronavirus is a health issue. It is not an aviation issue. Until the minister certifies it healthy for international airlines to resume, they cannot resume. Let's look at a summary of the NAMA's financial struggles here. They've estimated, this day estimated they have about 3,000 staff with a monthly wage bill of 1.5 billion naira. Monthly, multiply by that 12 if you want. High power costs to maintain their aeronautical equipment, and I hear, according to This Day article, the equipment is spaced out in far regions of the country, so you have to think about the transportation to go all the way there, and in order to use generators to maintain them. Also, only cargo and evacuation flights have been operational during this lockdown period. Evacuation flights don't pay any NCA charges because they are considered to be emergencies. And then they've also earned something called the weather report fees from overflyers. Overflyers are planes passing through Nigeria's airspace to other destinations. So we've talked extensively about the issues, the financial struggles faced by the airlines. You're now seeing the issues here faced by the agencies. Of course, with a 1.5 billion naira monthly wage bill, you have to ask yourself about the cost efficiencies of the agencies. You need an aerospace management agency. You've got to monitor planes flying in and out. So can they possibly be downsized? We haven't heard of layoffs or anything from the government side. So that's something that has to be looked at. We move on quickly to MTN. MTN is exiting the Middle East, and we've got a summary here of what's been going on. I think they're coming out of Syria, well, all of the Middle East, but they have a 75% stake in MTN Syria, which is up for sale. Teleinvest, which is a company out there in the Middle East, they're a 25% stakeholder in MTN Syria. They are a possible buyer. They're also looking at exits for Afghanistan, Yemen, and Iran. Now, here's an interesting thing. Part of the reason why is unprofitability. The Middle East contributed 4% to their EBITDA half-year earnings. EBITDA is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. This is not even bottom line profit. So by the time you take out your interest, tax, and so on, you're talking about really low single digits profitability from the Middle East. They've got a number of headwinds. Currency depreciation from the Middle East, legal issues. They've been accused of bribes to buy their way into their Iran broadcasting license. They've been accused of supporting terrorists in Afghanistan because according to the allegations state that MTN paid Taliban officials to protect their base centers in Afghanistan. And then geopolitical tensions. The U.S. sanctions on Iran have made it difficult for them to repatriate their funds out of Iran. So they are straight up clearing out of the Middle East. Let's take a look at a quote from Rob Shooter. He is the MTN current CEO, but he's leaving in 2021. He said, we felt we were best served in the medium term to rather focus our energies in our core African markets that are closer to home. So they're leaving. And then finally, this is a very fascinating case out of South Africa. The FCSA, this is the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, the regulator in South Africa that keep up the integrity of capital markets in South Africa and also regulate financial service authorities. They are looking at some lawsuits by hospitalities companies and tourist companies that have been leveled against insurance companies. The case is here that all these companies that have faced massive hits in their finances due to COVID-19 are saying that insurance companies in South Africa should cover them for their losses. The insurance companies are saying, no, there is no language in our your coverage that covers you for pandemic issues. And if you think about it, if you're an insurance company, if you were to underwrite the value of the financial hits to a pandemic, you might go out of business. But in the United States and in the UK, they are siding with insurance. There's a case here between Chameleon Cafe and Guard Risk. Guard Risk is the fourth largest insurance company in South Africa. Yeah, Chameleon Cafe won a judgment against Guard Risk, but Guard Risk is appealing it as we speak. Another insurance company. So the insurance companies don't want to have to be put on the line for the risk of what's been going on with the pandemic because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. But the authorities, I think, might come down on the side of the businesses. We'll have to see how it goes. And that's our update.
Let me begin with the Nama story, Reuters. What is the likely fallout of this? Because we heard of that possible aviation bailout by the government still in the works. But if you have a 1.5 billion naira monthly wage bill, how are we going to survive that?
Yeah, I know. I mean, and so the bailout, again, I said this when we're talking about Bristol, when we're talking about Arik, when we're talking about all the other airlines. With each day, your costs don't take a break from whatever issues you're facing. You face costs every single day. So if you think about from March, when all these shutdowns happened, we're in August now. Multiply the losses and multiply the financial hit. Governments have to move quickly. They've been talking about this bailout. So now we haven't heard anything as to the amount of when it's been completed.
Does the Nigerian government have the resources? Because the last time we heard about this bailout, the Presidential Task Force reassured stakeholders within the aviation industry that government was going to move quickly. Now, 2 months is quite some time. Now, I think that the federal government will need to come forward whether they can afford the bailout or they cannot afford it. But what the experience of NAMA shows is that it's not just travel agencies or the airlines. It's a whole chain within the aviation industry that needs a bailout, that needs support. And I just hope that the federal government is not under pressure to ask that international flights should be resumed. Because if you look at the NAMA story, NAMA is saying that they get most of their revenue from international flights, and that domestic airliners, do not really pay up. And so the charges that they get from other sources will not be enough or is not enough to sustain them. I think that, as the various aviation experts we've had on this program have consistently pointed out, safety must be the first consideration. As for MTN, that's purely a business decision. Yeah. If Middle East operations contribute just about 4% to the total earnings of the group, then, of course, MTN is in the Middle East is taking a realistic view of the business and saying, well, it's probably not worth it. So that's just a practical business decision.
I just quickly wanted to comment on the big trouble that will come as a result of, underwriting businesses during the pandemic season. I think that We need to have a rethinking of the insurance sector. I'll just say that, but we're going to move on to Michael Wilson real quickly.
Thank you, Rotus.
Thank you.
Michael, great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I think that business interruption insurance that Rotus was talking about, that's what it's called here, is going to be a huge story as this crisis, if it does, gets any better. There are enormous calls for this, and the writing on a lot of these policies is only going to give money to the lawyers involved, I would imagine. But that's another story for another day. Let me fill you in on where the Far East or Asia's been going. China and Hong Kong falling very sharply after the Trump administration unveiled this plan to stop companies transacting with TikTok and WeChat. They put a deadline on that for September the 15th. There's more to come there. I'll give you more details on that in a second. Japanese shares also fell as the market reacted to a string of disappointing forecasts. And also, of course, everybody's slightly treading water because of the big one today, which is the US non-farm payrolls at 1:30, your time and my time. You'll be talking about that later. Japan stock market's down as well because they've got a public holiday on Monday as well. But anyway, it's the job one, the big one. Global equity markets higher, very slightly. Investors waiting a word on the new US aid package. Again, I'll have more detail on that, such as we have it at the moment. And gold really extended its record-breaking run again, driven by expectations of more stimulus in the United States. Again, that's very much up in the air at the moment. And the dollar initially gained on those jobs figures yesterday, the weekly job claims, which didn't sound too bad. Gold's been rising, obviously, because there are concerns that stimulus will fuel inflation and erode the value of the dollar. So, President Trump has given companies 45 days to stop dealing with TikTok and WeChat. Of course, that's an executive order, and that comes at the same time that Microsoft is negotiating to buy the US part of TikTok from its parents. And a US official is quoted as saying that that September the 15th deadline would give time for parties to come to a deal. The US is also looking at additional tighter rules on Chinese companies listed on the American stock exchanges to strengthen disclosure around them and also auditing standards. If they choose not to comply, then they will be delisted. That's what they're saying. European equity markets basically lost ground yesterday. People are not really impressed by this lack of progress between the Republicans and the Democrats in relation to the proposed coronavirus relief package there. As I said yesterday, and this is still a quote for today, basically, they are trillions of dollars apart. Sticking points are absolutely fundamental, and it's going to take concessions either side to do these. Number one, renewing the $600 a week emergency benefits, and also including a huge $1 trillion to help citizen states that are dealing with falling tax relief and rising healthcare costs. I talked a little about the US jobs to start. They weren't too bad, actually, the weekly figures yesterday. And basically, the continuing claims fell to 16.1 million. So the US non-farm payrolls released at 1:30 today. That'll be the biggie, because that actually takes a month into rather than just a week. And the unemployment rate is tipped to fall to 10.5% from 11%. Average earnings as well. You should watch out for this, because they'll cool from 5 to 4.2%. The reason for that is that more lower paid workers are possibly I say, because nobody really knows at the moment, returning to work, because obviously hospitality and leisure sectors actually lost a huge amount of jobs, and some states have paused reopening their economy as well. So it's a bit of a mix. Bullish run in US tech stocks continues. This is like a buy anything market. We were talking about it yesterday. Can't go wrong if you buy into tech stocks. Another record high, up over 1.3%. I would caution you to look at something called the Russell 2000. That's closed fractionally lower yesterday, and that really concentrates on non-tech mid-cap companies, which are really what the action's all about in most economies, quite honestly. Gives a much better flavour than big multinationals and also tech stocks that presumably a lot of people don't actually understand. Back to us then. Bank of England kept interest rates at 0.1%. It suspects, though, that the economy will only contract, I say only, these days this isn't only 9.5% as opposed to their worries at 14%. However, it did say that the economy will not get back to pre-COVID levels until the end of 2021. And that I think is the most telling thing that they said yesterday. So the UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak is going to Scotland today to talk to people there. He'll come under pressure to extend the furlough scheme beyond October. I don't think it will. I think he'll call upon the support he's already got from the Bank of England that they think it's a good idea to start phasing it out then. And the final thing really is, I talked about gold. That's hit records. It did come back, thought it would. Oil prices slipped slightly, but don't forget, WTI and Brent are both set for weekly gains of between 3 and 4%, and that's the best they've done since July the 3rd. That's the global outlook.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I mean, I have a couple of things to talk about. At first, Rishi Sunak saying the furlough and Bank of England saying the furlough will end around around October. Do you think the British economy will have recovered enough, or is this just going to lead to another biblical level of job losses? Because I don't see the economy doing very strong, and the furlough is ending, which have supported a lot of people. Because I was seeing a story in America, coming out of America, saying that as the money the government was giving the citizens came to an end, now they're defaulting on their homes. A lot of them are homeless now, and the market is quite big for that. Pretty much reminds me of the subprime mortgage crisis. Another thing I want to talk about is America saying you can't do anything with WeChat, you can't do anything with TikTok in the next 45 days. Are they going to extend it to other Chinese apps? Because it was India that started the trend. India, about a month or two ago, listed 55 Chinese apps and said this can't be used in India. So those some people will say because of the geopolitical tensions between India and China. But do you think America would extend beyond just TikTok and WeChat that they're talking about now?
All right. America first then. Realistically, I still think that Microsoft, which is a trusted operator as far as China's concerned, and it's one of the overseas companies that's been operating there for a very long time within China, and I think that they will be seen as a good forced marriage, if you like, with the American arm of TikTok, and TikTok desperately wants to get in to stay in the United States because of its market. Will the United States extend? It may well do. I mean, this is what we're seeing at the moment, aren't you? Protectionism. It depends how much Trump, I think, feels. I mean, all this is a political play, because we have the election coming up in November, and so if he decides that he needs another lever to work against the Chinese, and also to support the fact that he is a strong believer in America first, that of course is not realistic, but it sounds good on the campaign trail. Then there may be other Chinese companies as well. But I think that as well as TikTok and WeChat, the other most important thing that I was saying earlier on is the fact that Chinese companies or Chinese-owned companies listing in the United States will be delisted unless they are much more transparent and are much more compliant with the local conditions that they're actually working in, i.e. Wall Street conditions. And they are pretty strict there, and I think you'll find that will be a cause of leverage. As far as the UK is concerned, the Bank of England actually, as I said that they don't really expect the economy in the UK to recover to pre-COVID levels until the end of next year. Now, that's the amount. What shape will the economy be and what kind of jobs will be available? I do not know. And I don't think anybody else does. I can tell you, as I said yesterday, that I don't go out much, and my neighbours don't go out much. I don't know many people in London that are going out much, quite honestly, apart from the Cheap Eats scheme, which is actually very successful. So I think that I'm pretty certain the furlough scheme will end in October because, as I said, it's got the Bank of England support as well as the Chancellor. I think he might dangle it being tapered very, very slightly, but it has to go because it's unaffordable. You mentioned a scheme in the United States. Yes, of course, people are defaulting on their properties because they can't afford it. Some people were getting paid much more for being out of work and on that $600 a week compensation scheme than they were whilst they were working. So that all got rather skewed. So to answer your question, I think that, yes, the United States could get a lot firmer with Chinese companies. And no, I don't think that the furlough scheme will not be stopped in October. I think it will stop in October, but there might be a bit of tapering just to ease it with a bit of political lubrication, if I can put it like that.
Well, Michael, very quickly, I mean, executive orders are administrative handmaidens. and they can be abused. They can become instruments of dictatorship. Do you see the possibility of the executive order issued in this regard by President Trump being challenged in court? Now, TikTok, the clampdown on TikTok was long expected. But WeChat, that's a bit surprising with regard to the fact that it could have implications for personal relations, because WeChat is like WhatsApp, it's like Instagram. What do you think?
What I think is that I agree with you. I'm certain that lawyers will contest the executive order, and I'm certain that the Republicans and the Democrats will contest it as well. And we've seen that President Trump actually saying he'll bring another executive order to make sure that these stimulus talks actually end on time with some kind of a result. So what I think is that the lawyers will have a field day about it. Yes, it will be contested, and executive orders, as you say, are handmaidens of dictators. But that's what's happening. I think what also is happening, and this is the sort of broader thing, as far as I'm concerned anyway, I think that China is beginning to realize that some of its tactics are not going down well with the rest of the developing world. And if it wants its place at the high table, which its size says it should have, and its influence said it should have, and the way the world is actually moving eastwards, it should have, it has to play by the rules.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson.